Good evening. We interrupt the viewing from the events in Parliament to bring you this breaking news tonight, and that is of the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II has become the face of the British monarch as England's longest reigning monarch, having clocked over 70 years on the throne. In 2015, she became the longest reigning monarch in British history. And in 2022, she became the second longest reigning monarch in world history. Elizabeth was the ruler of Kenya when Britain was her colonial master between 1952 and 1964. And as the United Kingdom enters 12 days of mourning for their queen, here now is a recollection of the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II.
Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, better known to the world as Queen Elizabeth II, was born in London, England on the 21st of April 1926. She married Navy Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, a Greek prince, at London's Westminster Abbey on the 20th of November 1947. In 1952, Elizabeth and her husband Philip took a royal tour to Kenya, which at that time was under British rule. And whilst at the Treetop Hotel in Nyeri County, she received the news of the death of her father on the 6th of February. The 25-year-old princess was driven to a nearby airstrip where a plane was on standby to fly her home. She was then coronated as queen on the 2nd of June of the following year at Westminster Abbey, the first ever coronation to be televised. 10 years later, on the 12th of December 1963, Kenya became an independent nation under the Kenya Independence Act. But Queen Elizabeth II remained the nation's head of state until exactly a year later, when Kenya became a republic. Queen Elizabeth has been served by 15 prime ministers, and during her reign, there have been 14 US presidents and 5 Kenyan presidents. On the 9th of September 2015, she became England's longest-running monarch, having served the kingdom for over 63 years. In early 2022, she suffered a health scare after a bout with the COVID-19 pandemic in February. Whilst she survived, she has faced various health challenges thereafter, and barely a day after she appointed Liz Truss as England's new Prime Minister, she was forced to cancel a planned virtual meeting with ministers on Wednesday after being advised to rest by her doctors. Queen Elizabeth is survived by 4 children: Prince Charles, born in 1948, Princess Anne, born in 1950, Prince Andrew in 1960, and Prince Edward in 1964. Her husband, Philip, died in April 2021 at age 99. Wahiga Mwaura, Citizen TV.
Yeah, and that story by Wahiga Mwaura just capturing the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II, who has today died at the age of 96. Now, earlier in the day, there had been word of her failing health, with her medical team saying she was under close medical supervision, with all her children making their way to Balmoral Castle in Scotland to be by her side. Now, remember, this is happening just 2 days after she met Liz Truss, who is now the new Prime Minister of the UK, to get the mandate to be Prime Minister. That was the day before yesterday. That was on Tuesday, when she met both Liz Truss and who was then the outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, before the handover there to Liz Truss, who is now the new Prime Minister of England. And that happened at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. And it was today that we received news that her health was failing, her medical team keeping her under close supervision, her children, of course, being asked to go there to be by her side at this time. And here's just a little bit of something on the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II, born in 1926 in London, in the United Kingdom, on the 21st of April. And in 1947, she married Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. who was her distant cousin. In 1952, she became queen upon her father's death, and that happened when she was just 25, while she was in Kenya on a royal tour. Many remember she, visited parts of the country, including Nyeri, at the Treetops Hotel, is where she got the news of her father's passing. In 1953, she was crowned on the 2nd of June at Westminster Abbey. In 2012, the Queen marked 60 years on the throne, and in 2015 she became the longest reigning British monarch, and later in 2022 became the world's second longest reigning monarch. Many will remember that the death of her husband, Prince Philip, that was last year in 2021, and he died aged 1999. And she suffered a bout of COVID, testing positive earlier this year on the 20th of February, before recovering, making a full recovery. And of course now we know of her passing at the age of 96, leaving behind 4 children. That is Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. So we have some more information for you. These pictures that you are seeing on your screen are live from the BBC. This is of Buckingham Palace. That is back in England. And of course, she died in Scotland, part of the United Kingdom. Now, this is what would typically be happening following her death. Now, immediately upon the Queen's death, her private secretary reportedly calls the Prime Minister to inform her of the news. It is said, and you've seen this going round perhaps, that London Bridge is down. And the royal household would then issue a statement for that regarding her death. This is what happened. Yes, the Prime Minister, of course, is usually the first member of government to make a statement on the death of the Queen. And then the Prime Minister holds an audience with Prince Charles, who will then deliver a broadcast to the nation. As you can see, there's quite some activity around Buckingham Palace as people start to make their way there to mourn the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. You can already see some activity happening around there. So like we were saying, immediately upon her death, the private secretary informs the Prime Minister of the death of the Queen. The royal household also issues an official statement informing both the staff, the civil servants, members of the public of the Queen's death, and the news is then announced via an alert. Now, once that news is confirmed, flags across Whitehall are lowered to half-mast, and this should typically happen within about 10 minutes. The Ministry of Defence then arranges for gun salutes to take place. A national minute of silence is announced, and then there will be a service of remembrance that will also be arranged at London's St. Paul's Cathedral. Of course, these are all the events that would then take place following the announcement and the confirmation of the death of the Queen of England. Now, all of these events are what kicks in. You may have seen some talk about the BBC's website having a black mast. Well, the same thing happens with the royal family's website, which is changed to a black background with a small message confirming the Queen's death. And the UK government website will also display a black banner, with all government social media pages doing the same thing as well. Now, of course, there will be a lot of other events that kick off tomorrow following the succession, dealing with the succession of the monarchy. The morning after Queen Elizabeth's death, ideally tomorrow, Prince Charles will be sworn in as the new sovereign by the Accession Council. And the Queen's coffin will be carried to Buckingham Palace. If she dies at Balmoral Castle, as has happened, there is something known as Operation Unicorn is activated, meaning her coffin will be transported to London via royal train. If not possible, then that'll be transported by plane, at which point the Prime Minister and ministers of the government will welcome her coffin upon arrival. Now, there's many more of these that we will get into in just a moment, but of course, just for you to know right now that it has been announced that Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96. Kenya holding a special place in that she was announced queen in 1952 while just 25, while on a royal tour here in Kenya. She was the longest reigning monarch in Britain, having spent 20 years, rather 70 years on the throne, and having been the second longest reigning monarch in the world. Of course, she rose to the throne in 1952, and that reign ends today following her passing. Now, what's set to happen is that the United Kingdom will enter 12 days of mourning for their queen, even as all the other moments following will now proceed regarding her, the accession, perhaps to the throne, of Prince Charles, who is next in line. Now, to just continue to tell you more of what would happen, we'd left it at the Queen's coffin making its way to Buckingham Palace. This is in London. That would be from Scotland at Balmoral Castle, where she died. Now, once her coffin arrives in London, in the United Kingdom, in England, Prince Charles will receive the motion of condolence at Westminster Hall and later start his tour of the United Kingdom as its monarch. Now, Queen Elizabeth II is set to lie in state at Westminster Hall in the Palace of Westminster for 3 days in what would be known as Operation Feather. Now, there's more of that is happening. And of course, all of these pictures on your screen, you're seeing some of her wedding and some of her coronation as queen as well. Now, we had prepared that story for you by our Wahiga Mwaura, a recollection of the life and times of Queen Elizabeth II, who has today died at the age of 96. This is the breaking news that is coming in at this point. Let's take a break, a commercial break, and when we return, we'll of course be updating you, giving you more updates on this, as well as the events that are taking place in the National Assembly with the election of the position of Deputy Speaker. This is Citizen Television. Stay with us.